older, you're a late bloomer, and it didn't help me then, but of course now it's great wisdom.
She is 80 years old. Let that sink in. Goldie Hawn, the woman whose laugh once lit up television screens and whose spirit danced through decades of Hollywood history, just turned 80. And yet when a photo of her recently surfaced, the world did not blink. It gasped. Because Goldie does not just look good for her age, she redefines what aging looks like entirely. But this is not just about how she looks, it is about how she lives. Behind the sparkling eyes and signature giggle is a story few truly know. A story of heartbreak, reinvention, quiet power, and a love that refused to follow the rules. She was underestimated, boxed in, and written off. Yet she kept rising, smiling, and shining. At 80, she is not just surviving, she is radiating. Stay with us because once you see Goldie Hawn today, you will understand why no one can look away. The laugh that changed everything. Long before the spotlight, before the red carpets and film premieres, there was a little girl from Washington, D.C. who could make an entire room laugh without even trying. Goldie Jean Hawn was not born into fame. She was born into a modest Jewish family in 1945. Her father played music. Her mother ran a dance school. The home was filled with rhythm, routine, and quiet expectations. But Goldie was never quiet. Even as a child, her laugh would echo through the house like a burst of sunlight, uncontainable and pure. She began dancing before she could spell her own name. Ballet shoes replaced bedtime stories. While other girls played house, Goldie pirouetted across hardwood floors with dreams too large for her living room. She trained with discipline, but the stage called her for something else. Not just movement, expression. She had a face that could switch from mischief to wonder in seconds. And even when she stood still, people watched her. Something in her made you smile before you even understood why. By the time she was in her early 20s, she had moved to Los Angeles. Not to chase fame, but to see where the laughter could take her. She was hired as a dancer on a sketch comedy show called Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. At first she was background, a blonde blur in go-go boots and glitter. But it did not take long for America to notice her. Her laugh, that wild and unrehearsed sound, became the heartbeat of the show. Audiences fell in love instantly. She was silly, she was unpredictable, she was electric. But what people missed, what they did not look closely enough to see, was the intelligence behind the chaos. Goldie was not just the joke. She knew the rhythm of comedy better than anyone. She understood timing like a dancer understands beats. The ditzy act, that was her mask, and she wore it brilliantly. Beneath the wide eyes and confused tone was a sharp, intuitive woman who knew exactly what she was doing. She became the breakout star, not just of Laugh-In, but of an entire generation. Directors came calling, scripts were sent, but with every offer came the same role in a different dress. The blonde, the airhead, the pretty girl who did not know much but could make you laugh. And for a time, she played along. Because sometimes survival means playing the game until you are powerful enough to change the rules. Goldie Hawn was never just funny. She was disarming. She was brilliant in disguise. And in a world that underestimated her at every turn, she chose to build her legacy with laughter. Not as a defense, but as a weapon. The world thought they had discovered a giggle. What they really found was a storm in glitter and heels. And the real Goldie was just getting started. Blonde, beautiful, and always underestimated. She had become a household name before she had even figured out where she fit in it all. One moment she was dancing in the background. The next she was being handed lead roles and magazine covers. But with every new opportunity came the same old assumption. Goldie Hawn was the dizzy blonde, the adorable flake. The girl who got by on charm and beauty, not substance. It was the price she paid for making the world laugh too easily. People rarely stopped to wonder who she was underneath the glitter. Hollywood has always been quick to label, and for a woman like Goldie, whose very essence seemed wrapped in light, it was even easier to decide what box to put her in. She was handed roles that asked her to smile, giggle, fall in love, and fade into the background. And for a while she played along, not because she could not do more, but because she was waiting, watching, learning. She knew better than to fight the current before she knew how to swim in it. She studied directors. She paid attention to how scripts were built. She watched how male actors were given room to be complex, while women were handed punchlines and kisses. She accepted what came, but she never stopped thinking. Because Goldie Hawn was never going to stay the girl in the bikini. She just needed time to become the woman who could call the shots. In public, she laughed. She was warm, approachable. But in private, she was writing notes in the margins of every script. She was preparing. Her intelligence had always been her secret weapon. And while the world adored her sparkle, she began quietly building something they would never expect. A career that belonged to her, not just as a face, but as a mind. Then came the moment she had been waiting for. A chance to play against type, a role that asked her to stop laughing, to let the world see what lived behind her eyes. Cactus Flower was that film, and in it, she revealed a different kind of Goldie. Fragile, sharp, devastating. The Academy noticed. She won the Oscar. The industry paused, but still they did not understand. They thought it was luck, an exception, a fluke in a career made of sunshine. What they did not know was that Goldie had been preparing for that moment since her first day on set. She thanked them graciously. She smiled, held the statue, posed for photos. But inside, she was already thinking of what came next. Not because she wanted more fame, but because she wanted more truth. Goldie Hawn had no interest in playing characters written to be small. She wanted to play women who were alive, messy, deep. And slowly, film by film, she would prove that behind the laugh was a mind too big to be ignored and a soul too bold to be tamed. The Oscar that didn't change her. Winning an Oscar is supposed to change everything. It is supposed to open doors, erase doubt, and silence every critic who ever saw you as less than what you are, and for most it does. But when Goldie Hawn won Best Supporting Actress in 1970 for Cactus Flower, something strange happened. The statue was real, the applause was thunderous. But the roles stayed the same. She was still being offered the same blonde, bubbly characters, still asked to play the love interest, the distraction, the smile that filled the empty space. She could have been angry, she could have disappeared, but Goldie did what she always did. She laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was disarming. She understood the game. She knew the system was built to reward women who stayed inside the lines. But Goldie Hawn had never been good at coloring neatly, so she played along long enough to learn how to flip the rules. After the Oscar, she did not chase prestige. She chased stories that felt alive. She made bold choices. Films like Butterflies Are Free and The Sugarland Express showed deeper sides of her. They were characters with vulnerability, with pain just beneath the surface. She brought that pain to life with the same ease that she once brought laughter. But still, the industry hesitated. It was as if they could not believe that the girl who once danced in a bikini on television could also hold the screen with gravity. Goldie never complained. She pivoted. When the parts did not challenge her, she challenged herself. She started developing projects, producing. She wanted control. Not to be powerful for the sake of power, but to tell stories the way she felt they should be told. Her mind was constantly in motion. She saw opportunity where others saw limits. She trusted her instincts even when no one else did. That quiet determination, hidden behind her soft voice and sunlit smile, became her secret armor. She stayed true to herself. She did not become someone else to please the critics. She did not dress differently or speak more seriously. She did not dim her joy to be taken seriously. She just kept showing up. Film after film, layer by layer, she let her work speak for her. And over time, something incredible happened. People began to see what had been there all along. A woman who was not playing a part. A woman who was living her truth in full color, even when the world only wanted black and white. The Oscar did not change Goldie. It only confirmed what she already knew, that she was not here to be a trend. She was here to be a presence. And presence is something you carry long after the applause fades. Goldie Hawn never chased legacy. She just lived so fully, so truthfully, that it followed her anyway. Love, loss, and the man who didn't stay. She had the career, she had the fame, but behind the scenes, Goldie Hawn was quietly learning that even the brightest spotlight could not warm a cold heart. While the world clung to her laughter and charm, Goldie was living through something far less glamorous. a love story that started with hope and ended with silence. She married Gus Triconis in the late 1960s. It was young love, naive, tender, the kind of love that feels permanent until it quietly isn't. For years, she juggled auditions with dinners, scripts with expectations, and silence with forced smiles. Gus was a dancer-turned-director, talented, yes. But in Goldie's rising shadow, he began to disappear, not physically but emotionally. Their marriage withered slowly. There were no public fights, no dramatic betrayals, just a growing distance that no amount of laughter could close. Goldie tried, she always tried, but eventually she realized that love alone was not enough to save a story that no longer had a script. When the marriage ended, it was not with rage, it was with acceptance. She was a mother by then. A young woman trying to raise a son, Oliver, while keeping her career from swallowing her whole. She did it with grace, with grit. She smiled through interviews and carried heartbreak in private. Goldie never let the public see her unravel. That was part of her strength. She knew the world needed her light, even when her own was flickering. She married again in 1976. This time to musician Bill Hudson, and for a while it seemed like the second chance she deserved. They had Kate, her daughter, who would grow to carry her mother's spirit into a new generation. But this love, too, was not built to last. Bill left. Goldie did not chase him. She did not beg him to stay. She picked up the pieces and held her children close. She once said, "I never gave up on love, but I learned not to give myself away for it." She could have been bitter. She could have let the pain sour her joy. But Goldie did the opposite. She became softer, wiser. She poured herself into her work, into her children, into a version of family that did not require a traditional shape. She stopped looking for the fairy tale. She started writing her own story instead. There is something powerful about a woman who chooses not to wait. Goldie Hawn did not wait for a man to validate her worth. She did not wait for the perfect marriage or the perfect ending. She kept moving, kept laughing, kept mothering. And in doing so, she built a life rooted not in fantasy, but in fierce, radiant truth. The men did not stay, but Goldie did. For her children, for her dreams, for herself. And that choice would become the foundation for everything beautiful that came next. Then came Kurt, and everything softened. By the time Goldie Hawn met Kurt Russell, she was no longer looking for a man to complete her. She had already learned the hard truth about love, that it can arrive like lightning and vanish just as fast. That promises made at the altar do not always keep you warm when the nights get long. So when Kurt came into her life, she did not fall. She walked, carefully, thoughtfully. But something about him made her stop in her tracks. They had met once before briefly on a film set when she was 21 and he was still a teenager. Nothing came of it then, but fate has its own rhythm. Years later, they were cast together in Swing Shift. Goldie was in her late 30s, a single mother, a seasoned actress. He was no longer the boy from her memory. He had grown into a man with gentleness behind his eyes and a steadiness in his presence. And Goldie, who had spent years building strength from broken pieces, felt something she had not felt in a long time, safe. There was no whirlwind romance, no fairy tale wrapped in diamonds, just connection, respect. They started talking, then laughing, then building something neither of them had expected. Kurt did not try to outshine her. He did not try to fix her. He simply met her where she was and stayed. For a woman who had spent her life being left, that simple act of staying meant everything. He took to her children without hesitation. Oliver and Kate adored him, and he adored them back. Goldie has often said that watching Kurt become a father to her children was the moment she truly fell in love. It was not the way he looked at her, it was the way he showed up for them. He did not need a spotlight, he just needed a place in their lives. They never married. That choice, too, was deliberate. People questioned it, pushed, wondered why they would not make it official. But for Goldie and Kurt, love was not about paperwork, it was about presence. They once said that if they had gotten married, they might have ended up divorced. The lack of a contract made them choose each other every single day, not out of obligation, but out of want. Together, they built something rare in Hollywood, a lasting love, a real partnership. One built not on fantasy, but on friendship. He saw her fully, the woman beneath the laughter, the mother, the leader. the soul that carried both joy and ache. And in loving her without trying to change her, Kurt Russell gave Goldie the one thing she had never truly had: peace. She did not need him, but she chose him. And in that choice, Goldie Hawn found not just love, she found rest. And for the first time, the girl who once danced her way into the world learned how to be still, held, and completely seen. Behind the smile, the woman few really knew. To the world, Goldie Hawn was the woman who never stopped laughing. She danced through interviews, joked on set, and brought joy into rooms that felt heavy before she walked in. Her energy was light. Her spirit seemed untouched by the weight that crushes most people in Hollywood. But behind that smile was a woman who carried much more than the world ever saw. It was not an act. Her joy was real, but it came from choice, not ease. Goldie learned early that happiness was something you had to create for yourself. Beneath the glow of her stardom, Goldie struggled with anxiety. Not the kind that pauses a sentence or makes the room spin. The quieter kind, the one that follows you like a shadow. The one that whispers in the stillness when the applause fades and the lights go out. She once admitted that there were days she woke up with a tightness in her chest that would not leave. Days when she questioned if she was enough. Not as an actress, not as a mother, as a person. Even in the arms of Kurt Russell, even surrounded by children who loved her, there were moments of doubt, of fatigue, of feeling too visible and yet unseen. She carried the pressure of being the light in every room. And that weight, no matter how beautiful the dress, was heavy. She did not complain, she just kept smiling. But smiles can sometimes become masks, and Goldie wore hers with grace, even when her heart was tired. The industry did not want her complexity, it wanted her sparkle, so she gave it to them. But privately, she searched for more. She read books on spirituality, she meditated, she studied the brain. Not for show, but for healing. She needed answers, not for the roles she played, but for the restlessness inside her. She began to ask questions few in her position ever voiced out loud. What is happiness really? What is peace when you have everything and still feel incomplete? Goldie found her answers not on screen but in silence, in stillness, in sitting with herself long enough to hear her own voice again. She began practicing mindfulness. She stopped trying to be what everyone expected and focused instead on being whole. She spoke less in sound bites and more in truth, and the more she softened, the more she discovered that joy was not something you perform, it is something you protect. Behind the smile was not emptiness, it was effort. Years of holding everyone else up while learning how to carry herself. Goldie Hawn did not rise because life was kind. She rose because she made peace with its cruelty and still chose to laugh anyway. And that laughter, still golden after all these years, now comes from a place deeper than charm. It comes from survival, from awakening, from a woman who finally knows who she is when no one is watching, reinventing herself quietly and boldly. After years of laughter, heartbreak, and inner searching, Goldie Hawn found herself standing at a crossroads. Hollywood still wanted her to be the same girl from Laugh-In, the same wide-eyed blonde with perfect comedic timing. But Goldie had outgrown that version of herself. She had spent decades giving the world what it needed. Now it was time to give herself what she had always deserved. Not more fame, more freedom. She could have stepped back, retired, lived comfortably in the legacy she had already built. But Goldie was not wired for comfort. She was wired for curiosity. So she shifted, not with loud announcements or dramatic career moves. She simply began to reinvent herself from the inside out. The roles slowed down, not because she was finished, but because she was choosing differently. She stopped taking parts that boxed her in. She started looking for stories that meant something. And when those roles did not come, she made her own. She stepped into producing, becoming the force behind the scenes instead of always in front of the camera. She helped shape projects that had heart, humor, and depth. Stories about women with layers, women who loved and failed and tried again. She refused to be part of a system that told her aging was a problem. Goldie never hid from her years. She celebrated them. She once said that every wrinkle on her face was a mark of something survived, and she had survived so much more than anyone knew. At the same time, she leaned into something even more radical: stillness. For a woman who had built her image on movement and light, she began exploring the power of quiet. She learned to sit, to listen, to create not from performance but from purpose. Her interest in the mind deepened. She studied neuroscience. She learned about the effect of stress on the brain. She became fascinated by how peace is made, not found. And that fascination would become something far greater than a personal hobby. She began speaking publicly, not as a celebrity, but as a woman who had been through it. She did not lecture. She shared, gently, truthfully. People leaned in because they could feel that she was no longer trying to impress anyone. She was simply trying to be of service. Goldie Hawn had quietly become a teacher, not in the academic sense, in the emotional one. A guide for those trying to find their joy again in a world that can so easily steal it. Her reinvention was not loud, it was grounded. It was not for show, it was for peace. She had done the red carpet. She had held the golden statues. Now she was building something more lasting than applause. She was building a life that did not rely on being seen to be meaningful. And in doing so, Goldie Hawn proved that a woman does not need to disappear when the spotlight dims. Sometimes that is when she finally begins to shine. Motherhood, Hollywood, and holding it all together. Even as she reinvented herself off-screen, Goldie Hawn's most enduring role had nothing to do with scripts or spotlights. It was the role she never auditioned for and never stopped playing: motherhood. To the public, she was the sunny actress with a golden laugh and a famous partner. But at home, she was just mom, the one who packed school lunches between filming schedules, the one who sang lullabies after long nights on set, the one who held it all together even when the seams threatened to split. Raising children in the glare of Hollywood was never easy. Paparazzi hovered, rumors flew, privacy was fragile, and yet Goldie created something sacred within the chaos. A home where her kids could be loud, creative, safe. She taught them how to be kind, how to be grounded, how to trust themselves in a world that often demands masks. She gave them freedom, but she gave them roots too. Goldie was not just a mother, she was a soft place to land. Kate Hudson once said that her mother raised her with joy and purpose, that she taught her how to laugh when things fell apart and how to believe in her own voice. It was not about being perfect. Goldie never pretended to be. It was about being present, being honest, letting her kids see her strength, but also her softness. She welcomed their questions. She embraced their quirks. She never expected them to be perfect either. She just wanted them to be whole. And they watched her, not just on television, in the quiet moments, in the way she treated people on set, in the way she spoke to strangers, in the way she navigated heartbreak without turning bitter. Goldie never gave speeches. She lived by example, and her children followed that light. Kate became a star in her own right, but more than that, she became a woman with her own laugh, her own fire, her own voice. And Oliver found his rhythm too. Both credited their mother not just for raising them, but for raising them to trust joy. It was not always easy. Goldie had to make sacrifices. She missed moments. She worked through birthdays. She carried guilt, the way mothers do, even when they are doing their best. But she never let that guilt harden her. She let it shape her. She kept showing up. She kept doing the work no one applauds, the late nights, the early mornings, the quiet forgiveness of herself when she could not be in two places at once. Through all of it, Goldie balanced the weight of two worlds: the image the world loved and the reality she cherished. She held them both with grace, never pretending to have it all figured out, just loving deeply and fiercely, the way only a mother can. And in doing so, she became more than a Hollywood legend. She became a legacy of love, a woman who made room for her children to rise, not behind her, but beside her, always. The Mind-Up mission and Goldie's true calling. Motherhood had deepened her. It had peeled back every layer of performance and revealed a woman who understood that real impact does not come from the spotlight. It comes from service, from showing up for something bigger than yourself. And for Goldie Hawn, that something arrived quietly, not on a film set, but in a classroom filled with restless children. One visit to an elementary school changed everything. She saw anxiety in their small faces, tension in their bodies, children who could not focus, who could not breathe, who were already learning how to carry stress before they had learned long division. She recognized that anxiety because she had lived it too. And in that moment, Goldie found her true calling. She did not want to start a foundation just to say she had one. She wanted to build something lasting, something real. She gathered neuroscientists, psychologists, and educators. She asked questions. She listened. And then she created Mind Up, a program designed to teach children mindfulness, emotional regulation, and resilience, not through slogans, through science, through practice, through compassion. It started small, a few schools, a few hundred students. But like all things touched by Goldie's quiet fire, it grew. Mind Up is not about meditation for fame. It is about changing the way children see themselves and the world around them, teaching them to pause, to breathe, to notice. It gives them tools she never had when she was their age. Tools to handle fear, to understand sadness, to respond instead of react. And through it all, Goldie did not become the face of the movement. She became its heart. She visits classrooms. She sits cross-legged with children. She closes her eyes and breathes beside them. There are no red carpets, no scripts, just a woman who knows the value of stillness and wants to pass it on. Her joy, once used to entertain millions, now becomes medicine for the next generation. She shows them that it is okay to feel, that it is okay to slow down. That strength is not about pushing through. It is about knowing when to be gentle with yourself. The work does not get headlines the way her movies did. It does not draw applause the way her performances once did. But to Goldie, it matters more. It is the part of her life that feeds her soul. Because behind all the laughter and glamour is a woman who has always longed for peace. And now she gives that peace to others, one breath at a time. Goldie Hawn may have built her legacy in front of a camera, but her most powerful role has been behind the scenes. Lifting children who never saw her films, guiding minds that never knew her name, and in that quiet mission, she has found something deeper than fame. She has found purpose. The kind that does not fade with age, the kind that only grows. Aging in the light, not hiding, just glowing. While the world continued to marvel at her outer glow, Goldie Hawn never tried to chase youth. She never clung to the idea that beauty had to be frozen in time to still be worthy. She aged the way she lived, gracefully but unapologetically. As her foundation grew and her focus shifted from scripts to service, the cameras still found her. And when they did, the public could not help but gasp. At 80, Goldie looked radiant, but more than that, she looked at peace. It was not the kind of peace that comes from denial. It was the kind that comes from acceptance, from letting life mark your face and still smiling anyway. She refused to let the industry define her worth by the smoothness of her skin or the number on her birthday cake. She never claimed to be untouched by time. She simply refused to be undone by it. Her appearance became a topic of fascination, but Goldie always redirected the conversation. When asked about her beauty secrets, she spoke about gratitude, about joy, about the power of laughter. She said that what lives inside you eventually shows up on your face. And for her, that meant years of choosing love over bitterness, curiosity over fear, and service over ego. It was never about chasing youth. It was about nourishing the soul. She stayed active, not to be seen, but to feel alive. She danced in her living room. She hiked in the mountains. She cooked for her grandchildren and practiced mindfulness in the mornings. Her rituals were simple, but they were sacred. Goldie understood that aging well was not about erasing time. It was about honoring it, about looking in the mirror and seeing not flaws, but memories. Each line a moment survived, each crease a chapter written. She began to speak out about ageism in Hollywood, not with anger, with clarity. She reminded people that women do not expire, that wisdom is magnetic, that presence deepens with time. She showed up as herself, fully, no longer trying to fit into a role she had outgrown, no longer softening her power to make others comfortable, and in doing so, she gave other women permission to age without apology. There is something revolutionary about a woman who grows older without shrinking. Goldie Hawn became that woman, not because she fought aging, but because she walked through it with open arms. She embraced her age as proof of endurance, of growth, of joy that no longer needed to be loud to be real. She did not need to be the girl who once danced on screen. She had become the woman who taught others how to keep dancing, no matter how many years had passed. And as the world looked at her with disbelief, wondering how she still looked so vibrant, the answer was simple. She had never hidden from life. She had lived it fully, and that kind of light, once lit, never fades. A legacy written in light. Goldie Hawn never needed a statue to prove she mattered. Though her shelves held awards and her name lit up marquees, her real legacy was never going to be measured in trophies. It would be found in the quiet places, in the laughter of her grandchildren, in the stillness she taught children through Mind Up, in the resilience she passed to her daughter and the tenderness she poured into every soul who crossed her path. Her life, once built on performance, had become a story of presence. At 80, Goldie was not slowing down. She was shifting, choosing where her energy went with the wisdom only time could teach. She was no longer interested in being everything to everyone. She was focused on being true to herself. That meant saying no more often. That meant spending mornings in silence instead of makeup chairs. That meant writing her book not for fame, but for healing. Every chapter of her life had prepared her for this one, and in this chapter, she was free. The industry that once tried to define her had changed, so had she. But instead of chasing relevance, she created meaning. She became an icon not because she clung to the past, but because she walked fully into the present. She taught the world that aging does not mean fading. It means glowing with everything you have lived through. That real beauty is not filtered, it is felt. People still stop her on the street, still tell her she changed their childhood, still thank her for making them laugh when they needed it most. And she receives that love with humility because she knows what it cost to carry that light. She knows what it took to hold joy while healing. And she knows that the most powerful thing she has ever done is not perform, but endure. Her relationship with Kurt remained one of Hollywood's rare miracles, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. They weathered decades together by choosing each other every day, not for cameras, for each other. He saw her before the world did, and long after the curtains fell, he still stood beside her. That quiet loyalty became part of her legacy too. A love story written without vows but full of promise. Goldie's home is now filled with noise and peace, children laughing, dogs barking, the soft hum of a life well lived. She still dances, still laughs from her belly, still pauses to breathe. And in every moment, she is a reminder of what it means to live fully, not for applause, not for attention, but for love. As the years continue forward, one truth remains. Goldie Hawn did not just make people laugh. She taught them how to live, with lightness, with courage, with grace. Her story is not finished, it is still unfolding. And every day she wakes up smiling, the world gets a little brighter. Because some stars never burn out, they simply become the sun. Goldie Hawn is 80 years old, but numbers mean little when a spirit remains timeless. She has given the world laughter, light, and wisdom far beyond the screen. From her early comedic genius to her quiet revolution in mental health advocacy, Goldie has lived each chapter with intention. She never tried to fit into Hollywood's mold. Instead, she reshaped it by living out loud, loving deeply, and aging without apology. Her legacy is not only etched in film, but in the hearts she's touched, the children she's helped, and the generations she's inspired. Today, when you see her, glowing, grounded, and full of life, it is not her appearance that takes your breath away. It is everything she has survived, everything she has chosen, and everything she continues to give. Because Goldie Hawn is not just aging, she is ascending. And in her radiance, we are reminded of what it truly means to shine.